Developing a skill set and putting a plan together to go after home builders as a prospect does a lot of different things for you. Number one, it makes you a subject matter expert in that field because there aren't a lot of people in your area that are just specializing in that understanding. Number two, in the process of getting to understand the home builder, the home building method, and how that person interacts with the city, you're going to build additional relationships, not just with buyers and sellers, but maybe city officials and having an understanding of what's going on in your city. This is going to make you a subject matter expert in your location, probably to the level that a lot of other realtors, real estate professionals just don't have. And number three, most importantly, it's going to be a lead generator for you. There's a lot of potential benefit to going after home builders as a prospect. Number one, most home builders, when they're selling their properties, they do cooperate with buyer's agents. If you have a buyer who's interested in purchasing a brand new home, it's important for you to go and register that customer with that individual agent. Some parts of the country have got very large builders, and those large builders have in-house captive salespeople, which means those salespeople can only work in that community. If you're a realtor, an independent contractor, and you're driving around town with a buyer, you want to make sure that you go register your customer with any home builder, large home builder that requires pre-registration, and get that out of the way. Because your customer, your client, your buyer is probably going to stumble into their sales office, maybe on purpose, maybe on accident. And as soon as that buyer shows up and engages another sales professional that might be paid directly as an employee with the home builder, you might accidentally get cut out of the deal, cut out of the commission. This is probably the number one reason why a lot of realtors don't like to show new homes, because sometimes, builders can be a little bit difficult to deal with. But if you register your buyer up front, there's a lot of benefits in being able to do that. The other reason is that in those sales office arenas, the builder representative many times does all the paperwork. Now, as a realtor, this means you're going to give up a certain amount of control, but it's to everyone's benefit that your buyer goes through the builder's process to a successful conclusion. And this is how you keep the transaction simple. You keep all the paperwork done correctly. And most importantly, it frees your time up to do some more prospecting. So that's one thing that's a really great benefit. A second benefit is that sometimes when a larger builder starts getting toward the end of a community and they're not using realtors to sell their properties, all their properties, you might have the opportunity to pick up the onesie twosie and the leftovers. I have sold many large projects that have had between 60 and 120 homes under construction. And the large home builder, public builder, they get to a point in the process where it just doesn't make economic sense for them any longer to keep the sales office open, to pay 2 or 3 sales professionals a base salary, plus workers' comp, plus medical care, and all these other things. There's a lot of overhead for the builder in maintaining a sales center. And sometimes the models are sold. Now, most of the larger home builders that have in-home salespeople, in-house salespeople, they're much more accustomed to working out of an office environment. However, as a realtor, independent contractor, if you have to meet somebody at Starbucks, if you have to do some kind of paperwork in your car, hey, no big deal. We do it all the time. It's just kind of how we do business. So getting into a relationship, even with these large home builders, is not a bad idea, because you have the ability to possibly pick up loose ends at the end of the project. Number 3, home builders, particularly large home builders with in-house captive salespeople, have really no idea how to deal with contingencies. So if your buyer has a home to sell, or if a buyer walks into their sales center with a home to sell and it's a large brand like KB Home or Richmond American or Landsea or Lennar, any of these bigs, guess what? They don't take listings. So sometimes what happens is a customer will come into their sales center. They want to buy a property, and the sales associate quite literally will turn to them and say, well, go sell your home, and when you sell your home, you can come back and buy this one. Now, as a realtor, that just violates our sensibility, because they're like, what are you talking about? Take the listing. If you can start developing a great relationship with a localized sales team in that environment, you can become their contingent property manager. What does that mean? You're a realtor who is giving a good CMA, a good valuation, a good broker price opinion. You're doing that for free for the captive salesperson, for the builder's salesperson. And you're doing this to deepen the relationship. Now, some of these folks are under a mandate that, well, I can't give you a direct referral. But what they can do many times is hand out a list with 3 recommendations on it. And what are they doing? This reduces their referral exposure, because that's a big issue for big builders. And you get on the list. Now, the truth of the matter is you're the one there, and you're the one, developing the relationship with this individual. So the odds are good. You're probably going to get more of these contingent listings than someone else might get. Number 4, all builders are not the same. And so there are plenty of builders out there. I kind of categorize them into 3 groups. You've got the big public builders, you've got like the LLC, single LLC use builder, and then you got the guy with the general contractor's license. Now, the guy with the general contractor's license and those small LLCs, single use LLCs, are much more prone to possibly use a realtor to sell their homes, which means as a listing agent, you can go and list the entire building. You can go and list 30, 40, 50 homes at a time. I've been very fortunate to be in this position lots, and it's great. It takes a while to develop the relationship, but there's nothing better than to walk out of a meeting with a signed contract that you're going to sell 100 houses. It just makes life a little bit easier. Number 5, one of the best reasons to start establishing a relationship with the builders and the developers is you want to establish a long-term farming relationship at that new home location. More times than I thought would ever happen, I'm selling 20, 30, 50 houses in a community, and within the first year, year and a half, there are a lot of resales that were in my particular development. Why does this happen? Why? Because life goes on. I think we've all probably seen situations where a couple buys a house together, and then something happens. There's some unfortunate circumstance either in the relationship or the family changes, whatever, and you see these for sale signs in a brand new community. Well, wouldn't you want to be the realtor that would be the preferred vendor that could go in there and start getting these relationships sooner? Let's define who's actually in your market. In my opinion, there are 3 major types of home builders that are operating in the area where you are. You have large public companies, and these large public companies are large branded. They're prominent through like the Sun Belt. You get Texas, California, Arizona, Florida. There are companies like Lennar, Richmond America, Toll Brothers, all these Pulte, these really big publics. They are machines, right? Their job is to produce a product in mass and to turn as many dollars as they possibly can. Usually driven off quarters because they're publicly held companies. They want to make sure they get their year-end goal, their quarterly goal. They're very, very driven in that way. Sometimes these builders have their own in-house captive sales staffs. In fact, the large publics almost always do. And what they're trying to do is achieve some sort of consistent, regular customer service. Now, the truth of the matter is those sales professionals that are sitting inside those sales centers of these large public companies have kind of a different skill set. Many of them aren't realtors, which means they're not members of the Board of Realty. They might very well have a real estate license, might be required for their state, but believe it or not, there are some states that don't require that. If you work directly for the developer, you don't need a real estate license. Laws are changing, and so I would recommend that you understand what's happening in your state. They're very concerned about the whole service level experience. They want to make sure it's consistent. They usually have a lot of rules. They want to many times use their own paperwork, which sometimes is difficult for you as a realtor because you have compliance issues that are specific to your brokerage, and they don't necessarily want to honor that or respect that. Number 2 builder that you're going to find in the market is what I call a small local builder or a single use LLC. What the heck is that? So these are corporations, little partnerships that are formed for a specific building project. You see a lot of this in high-rise development, mid-rise development, or a small LLC is formed to build 20 homes up the street. And what the good news is that a lot of times there's an opportunity there as a realtor to go get that listing. You can actually get that listing, manage that project. You might have in-house sales office. You might take it as a listing like any other listing you might take. And there's a whole bunch of opportunity there because there's flexibility, and the smaller LLC will many times have to rely on your sales and marketing expertise. And a lot of times they're much more approachable than you realize because these building projects are usually being managed by a project manager, not some big committee, but it's maybe one or two people who are coordinating resources to build a project, to build a high rise, to build 24 houses. That project manager sees the realtor as just another vendor. So if you're pouring concrete, delivering 2x4s, if you're putting roof sheeting on, or you happen to be a realtor, you kind of all fit into that same kind of category. What they have to do is hire a vendor to get a job done. Guess what? You're the vendor. If you start developing some relationships with these small LLCs or these small real estate developers who form these LLCs, you're in a great position to be able to get the listing. Number 3, small builder. And so I'd call this a general contractor, a guy with a general contractor's license and a pickup truck. So what's really interesting is if you take a look at the number of building permits that get pulled across the country, the vast majority of homes that are actually built in this country are built by a guy with a pickup truck and a general contractor's license. Just because they don't have a huge advertising budget, you don't necessarily know who they are. Because they finish the house, they usually will list it with a realtor. Sometimes that realtor is a family member, but sometimes it's not. All 3 of these different builder defined groups are functioning in your community right now. It kind of depends on the number of people who live in the population of your general metro. But there's opportunity in all 3 of these things. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of go through how do you approach these groups and what's the benefit. And so here are some of the things that you can do to get involved and to be able to start generating leads. I think the very most important thing you can do is understand what's happening in your community. And so if you're not already doing this as a realtor, I recommend that you do it, that you start attending public notices and city council meetings and planning department meetings. Why? Because what happens is before somebody can build something major in your city, they got to go tell somebody they need a permit, and they're going to have to do all sorts of things around satisfying the city requirement and building department requirements before that project needs to be sold as individual units. So before it gets sold as individual units, it's got to be built, and before it's got to be built, it's got to be, there's all this planning that has to stay in play. Now, in the process of doing this, there's some great benefits. You're starting to develop a relationship with the city planning people. It doesn't really matter how big or small your city is. I've lived in Los Angeles, and I've been able to get into a relationship with the assistant planning commissioner of LA County. It's not as difficult as you think because there's a lot of people that just aren't doing it. Now, also, these public officials, these people that are working in this environment, they love to hear from somebody in the community that's not complaining about something. And so you're a realtor, you're a professional, you're approaching them and say, I'm really interested. How do I get to understand more about what's happening in my community? They might refer you to the website that's got the general plan. A general building plan is an overall zoning scheme of, hey, there's going to be new residential here, there's going to be commercial here, there's light industrial over here, there's agricultural over here, and here's the 50-year growth plan for the city, the 20-year growth plan for the city. Now, also, there's a lot of cities and states that are under requirements. They have to build a certain number of brand new affordable houses every year. Now, the truth of the matter is most municipalities are way, way, way deficient in that, even though they're under a legal mandate to do it. So kind of understanding this puts you in a unique position. So you're building a pipeline of relationships of people who are interacting with the city. So the planning commissioner, deputy planning commissioner, or someone at the desk where you get building permits, do you think that person has interaction with home builders? Of course they do. Do they understand what's happening and when it's going to happen next? They do. You don't necessarily want to chase too much and waste too much time on the unicorn building. Oh, one day there's going to be 50 houses here and blah, blah, blah. So, 10 years later, it's not built. In the meantime, you're starving. But no. What you're going to do is put them on the list. If you start stacking up a list of 30, 40, 50, 100 different home builders with 500 different projects, you're going to put yourself in a unique position. Sometimes these opportunities get sold between developers and you already have a baseline understanding. You might want to go to the city council meeting or the planning commission, and in the public hearing, not only are you attending the public meeting, but you have an opportunity to speak. Get up in public, say your piece. You know what? We're really excited to have this developer come and build these homes because there's I'm in the real estate market, I'm in the industry, and there's a shortage of housing in this particular description. And, I'm so glad that they're here. Now, it's going to differentiate you because a lot of people show up to those planning meetings and they're neighbors, and they might be complaining, I don't want that built in my yard. Well, all of a sudden, you now become an advocate. If you're an advocate of the builder, you have every right to get into a relationship with them. Find out what's happening in your city. Make a plan to go to the planning commission meeting. It might be once a month. It might be once a quarter. Now, guess what else you can do with this? You can take the information that you've learned during these sessions, add it to your blog, shoot a quick video. Maybe you're an expert in this environment because you spend time there, or you're trying to be an expert, and you're going to shoot simple little 30-second, 1-minute updates. Every quarter, you're going to shoot an update on, hey, the planning commission there's so many proposed houses. Here's how many building permits were pulled in the first quarter, and here's how many homes were started. Oh my gosh, how powerful would that for you be to start posting that on social media? Okay. Another way that you want to start getting involved is get with your title rep and start understanding what is that process flow from a piece of raw land to finished lots and all that early entitlement. Because long before there's houses standing on a location, somebody has got to sign off on utility plan. So they're not going to build houses unless there's streets or proposed street and sewer. Well, what does that look like? So way upstream, you can actually start becoming aware of what are these key points in the development process that have to happen before you can actually take a listing. So you start becoming an expert in, maybe land purchase. What are the big land sales happening? And what are the plat maps or the track maps that are recording at the county recorder's office, what parcels of land are being sold. So you go from this basic zoning thing of the general plan, and then it kind of breaks down into like specific use permits or specific plan that gets segregated back down to residential, commercial, and then before you know it, okay, someone's got to file building permits. Like all these things are a matter of public record. Your title rep can absolutely help you in this environment. There are title reps across the country who specialize in entitlements for brand new construction residential. For gosh sakes, go buy this person a cup of coffee. There's someone that's in your location that's already doing it. And of course, at the real tip of the spear is building permits. So usually a building permit's got to get pulled on an individual either a single family residence, or we're going to start a multifamily building. That permit has got to be pulled. It's a matter of public record. If you're already familiar with people in your planning commission, then guess what? Maybe there's a simple phone call. Hey, anything interesting happening this week? I saw a sign go up, future development of XYZ housing community. Can you tell me, where is that in the process? So if you start building these allies and your title rep, so now you've got somebody in the planning commission, maybe you've got a title rep, okay? So here's how you get involved with the builder specifically. So we got way upstream. All of a sudden, now you are approaching an individual builder because you've identified them through the city. Maybe you met them at the planning commission because they're there talking about their project. A bunch of angry neighbors showed up, and you're like, you show up and you're like, hey, Jim, I love your project and thank you for letting me have the opportunity to speak about it. Now, why is this so important? Because the average developer, particularly in the LLC range or in the small developer range, they don't have any idea of what realtors actually do for a living. I know this seems staggering, but the truth of the matter is home builders, I would contend, are actually not in the real estate industry as you are. Home builders are in the manufacturing industry. They build a product in a remote location, and one of the components is land. Great. The truth of the matter is that only about 5% of the transactions that happen in the country are new construction, kind of depending on where we are in the building expansion model. But that means that 95% of transactions that happen, home builders don't really have any vision on or eyes on. A lot of the home builders, they're not members of the board of realtors. They don't even have access to the MLS. They're looking at Zillow, just like a lot of other lay persons, trying to understand what's happening in the market. This makes you a unique asset if you can introduce yourself into that world, start giving them some CMA information, start helping them with recommended pricing. Even if you have a signed contract, you start establishing value. Now, here's the truth. The truth is new homes usually sell at a premium to average price per square foot. So if you do a CMA for a home builder for estimated price or to try to get into a relationship with them, if you underestimate the numbers that they have to achieve in their business model, and it's a significant number, that's their expectation, and they're going to be offended, right? Because most of us realtors take a look at a home builder and say, well, I think the house is probably worth 500. Well, that developer might have to get 650 or 675 to break even. So if you show up with a proposed price of 500, you're going to have a problem. It's going to break the relationship. So you're not throwing a price out there. Now, eventually what happens is the houses hit the market, and the market determines the price. We all know that. Developers feel something different. Developers have a tendency to want to create the product and then determine how much profit they want, and then that's the sales price. Well, it hits reality, and sometimes they get knocked on their butt. In a hot market, sometimes they make a ton of money. But if you're positioning yourself as a community advocate, as a community business person that's functioning as a realtor, you're an invaluable asset to this person. Go start making friends. Go make a pipeline. Make a list. How many real estate builders, how many home builders are in your city right now or in your county right now that don't have an in-house sales professional? Every single one of those LLCs or every single one of those people should be on your prospect list. Going after home builders isn't for everybody, and every realtor has got a slightly different skill set. If this is a space that's interesting to you, I would love to help you. Get on my calendar and let's talk about some of the initial steps that you can take to add this as a key lead stream in your prospecting. Please hit that subscribe button, and don't forget, visit our website and schedule your free 30-minute evaluation.